The Rockets followed their 52-win season with an immediately active summer, making a few moves to solve their biggest issues and add depth. But what can we expect from them in 2026, and are they good enough to win a championship? The Rockets surprised a lot of people last year, myself included. With an above-average offense and a top-5 defense, they won enough games to secure the 2nd seed out west. Of course, they lost to the Warriors in a tough 7-game series, but I want to take a moment to talk about what made them so great. It started on defense, and that was all about personnel. Between Amen Thompson, Dillon Brooks, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith, they had a surplus of versatile defensive wings that left them with multiple good matchups for every team's primary creator. In the middle, Şengün took a serious step forward, using his size, positioning, and quick hands to really clog the lane, and although he isn't a big vertical presence, a few of those wings I mentioned can get up and protect the rim at a high level, so they always had someone to hold down the paint. Or they could run Şengün at the 4 and go with Steven Adams at the 5 for even more size, while their smallest player, Fred VanVleet, also happened to be the smartest defender on the team, so there really weren't many weaknesses to attack. On offense, they were probably the weirdest team in the NBA. If we take a look at the correlation between how well each team shot the ball and how efficient they were, you'll notice that Houston was a complete outlier, and that's because they absolutely dominated the possession game. You could probably make an argument that they were the best offensive rebounding team we'd ever seen, and their average of nearly 15 a game was the highest mark since 2003. With the dominant offensive rebounding, they were a relatively low turnover team, so while they weren't the best at making shots, they attempted more shots than any other team on a possession-by-possession basis, which led to an above-average offense. With that said though, the Warriors were able to exploit those weaknesses. Because they lacked a rotation of reliable shooters, Golden State had Jimmy and Draymond abandoning their matchups to roam the floor like free safeties, and that completely shut down Houston's perimeter isolations, took away the rim, and forced them to hit tough jump shots. Like I said, they didn't really have the shot making to win games like that. And another issue is that they didn't have much ball movement or motion going on, ranking dead last at about 262 passes a game. What made the lack of movement even more detrimental is that they lacked a true go-to action, or really even a creator they could consistently rely on in the half court. So late in games against high-level defenses like Golden State, they were prone to cold stretches or even complete collapses. Well, they made sure to address that over the summer, because as soon as the offseason started, they traded for Kevin Durant. Before we get into that, I want to give a huge shout out to Factor for sponsoring this video, because this 31-day video series wouldn't be possible without them. Between the time it takes to research each team and produce these videos while balancing my personal life, I just don't have time to cook for myself. If you find yourself in a similar situation, whether it be work, kids, or relationships, Factor gives you the option of a quick, easy to prepare, and fresh meal that meets your fitness goals. All you have to do is choose your chef-crafted meal from the fridge and pop it in the microwave for 2 minutes. Recently, they've doubled the size of their menu to 80+ rotating weekly meals, so whether you're craving a steak, a chicken breast, a calorie-smart, or vegan option, Factor makes it easier than ever to eat clean. For me personally, it's bulk season, so I've been loving their Protein Plus options. But no matter who you are, Factor makes it so easy to fit a healthy lifestyle into your daily routine, and that's why I'm super excited to bring you guys a special offer. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code HoopVenueFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. You heard that right, that's code HoopVenueFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. If there's anybody who can address an issue of poor shot making, KD's the guy, even at age 37. He's coming off a season where he made 79% of his shots at the rim, 53% from mid-range, and 43% from 3. Every single one of those marks ranked in at least the 93rd percentile. First, I want to talk about the mid-range game because of course that's his bread and butter, and he can get to those shots in a wide variety of ways. A few of these opportunities come away from the ball, so he should unlock some movement within the offense through his ability to knock down jumpers off of screens. A more motion-based offense could be good for everyone. Adams and Şengün are some of the best passing bigs in the league, and if you put the ball in their hands up top to set up action, you're able to get athletic slashers like Amen Thompson or Tari Eason playing on the move instead of having to create from a standstill. Another way Durant can get to the mid-range is out of pick and roll. This isn't as prominent in his game as it was a few years ago, but he's still a guy who can force bigs to make tough decisions, and he's pretty good at making the shovel pass so he can also help the roller. More times than not though, he'll get to the mid-range out of isolation. Whether it's with a live dribble from the perimeter, facing up inside the arc, or with his back to the basket, he remains one of the most devastating one-on-one scorers we've ever seen, and it's primarily a result of that incontestable jumper. Remember what I said about the Rockets lacking a go-to action in the half court? KD's isolation game instantly solves that issue. Last season, he averaged about 6 of those possessions a game, enough to still land him in the top 10. On those plays, the Suns generated nearly 1.2 points, good for the 95th percentile and more efficient than any player in the top 30 in volume. As for when he's playing away from the ball, that's where the 43% three-point shot comes in. Well, really, over the last 3 seasons, he's hit 44.5% of his threes off the catch, and that's a shot he can get to at will because of how high his release point is. Defenders have to hug him, but then he's also one of the quickest off-the-catch decision makers we've ever seen, capable of just destroying closeouts, so he's the type of guy who's just always going to seriously open up the floor. Also, I should mention another big offseason addition, Dorian Finney-Smith, because this is where most of his offensive impact comes from as well. He's coming off a season where he shot 41% from 3 on 5 attempts a game. So between him and KD spacing the floor in the front court, Houston's offense should open up like never before. A guy like Amen Thompson, who's at his best attacking downhill, should have an easier time finding lanes, and he's a good kickout passer, so there's some mutual benefit. More importantly though, for the first time in Alperen Şengün's young career, he'll have room to operate in the post. I personally think that's where he's at his best as an offensive player. Between the physicality, wide array of moves, and impressive passing, he can serve as a legitimate offensive hub with his back to the basket as long as he's got weapons around him. So going back to what I said about a go-to action, don't be surprised if a Şengün post-up becomes option number 2. The only problem is that for both of these actions, it typically requires a guy getting them the ball in the right spot. At this point in his career, Durant just simply isn't an initiator. He's not the type of guy to consistently get the ball up the court against pressure and organize an offense. He's at his best when he can catch the ball in a spot where he likes to operate, then from there he'll go to work. The same goes for Şengün. While he has a lot of guard skills, he's still more comfortable starting possessions like a big, and specifically when it comes to post-ups, they'll need guys who can make those entry passes. I wasn't too worried about this a few weeks ago, and then Fred VanVleet tore his ACL. Now that he's set to miss the entire season, the Rockets have a serious problem. That's because they relied on him very heavily to set up their offense. Here's a look at the relationship between how often a player has the ball and how much they turn it over. You'll notice all of the league's best turnover suppressors like Brunson, Shea, and Halliburton, but you'll also notice Fred VanVleet handling the ball just as much as Halliburton while somehow taking even better care of it. Remember what I said about Houston's offensive identity. They didn't shoot well, yet still had an above-average offense because they dominated the possession game. While rebounding played the biggest role in that, turnover suppression was also really important, and that was almost exclusively a result of Fred. Since he joined the Rockets, they've averaged about 12.5 turnovers every 100 possessions with him on the floor. Last year, that would have been approximately the 3rd lowest among all teams. In the minutes they played without him, that number jumps to nearly 15, which would have ranked 19th. So beyond the ability to get Durant and Şengün in favorable spots, what about just getting the ball up the court against pressure? Because as things currently stand, something's gonna have to change in order for them to have the ball handling and passing needed to not be a turnover machine. The first possibility is a serious leap from Amen. We've seen some of the point guard skills, like the ability to make difficult passes out of drives, but now he's gonna have to speed up the process of his development and just really be that guy for them. He hasn't yet shown much comfort dribbling through traffic or slowing down the offense and initiating in the half court. Most of his reps come with a head of steam or in transition, which, while valuable, doesn't solve the issue. The second possibility is that Reed Sheppard is ahead of schedule. We haven't seen too much indication that he's ready to be a part of a playoff rotation, let alone a primary initiator, but an idealized version of Reed is pretty close to being exactly what they need. He's got a good handle, he's always quick to make the right passes and get off the ball, and maybe most importantly, he projects to be an elite outside shooter. So at his best, you get an offensive organizer and floor spacer to really push the ceiling. At his worst though, he lacks the size, athleticism, and overall shot creation to demand serious playing time, and is far from being the sound team defender that Fred was for them. Let's assume for a second that neither Amen or Reed are ready to take the next step, and they find themselves a few months into the season desperately needing a point guard. That's when I think it'd be worth it to look elsewhere. They've got youth, they've got assets, and a point guard might just be the missing piece. So whether it's Tyus Jones, Spencer Dinwiddie, Peyton Pritchard, or even Chris Paul, I think it'd be worth it to make some calls. The reason I find this to be so important is because they check almost every other box you'd look for in a contender. I do think with the loss of Jalen Green, they're losing some valuable downhill pressure that they didn't really replace, which again takes me back to Amen, because if he's ready to take that leap, a lot of my concerns are eased. The other thing they really lost was the ability to pressure defenses through pull-up three-point shooting. Last season, they took the 9th most pull-up threes of any team at just under 12 a game. Here's a look at their leaders. Jalen and Fred combined for nearly 9, while Cam Whitmore and Dillon Brooks were the only other guys above 1. Between Fred's injury and trading the other 3, they basically wiped their roster of pull-up talent and replaced them with Durant, who was good for about 1 attempt himself. So between a lack of high-end rim pressure and basically no pull-up three-point threat, it does feel like they're leaving a little bit on the table offensively. However, because of dominant offensive rebounding, size and athleticism across the board, and improved shooting, as well as the isolation talent of KD and Şengün, as long as they're able to add a little bit more motion to their offense while keeping turnovers to a respectable level, they should still end up as an above-average offense. And that's all they'll need for defense to take care of the rest. They were already a top 5 defense last year. While they traded away one of the best man defenders in the league, they also traded the 2 weakest defenders in their rotation. Then they replaced them with a near 7-footer who can switch on to multiple positions and offer rim protection, as well as a big, physical forward who can really defend 2 through 5 if you truly need him to. Oh yeah, and they also brought in Josh Okogie, another impressive defensive athlete on the wing, and Clint Capella's back in town, who remains a big-time rim protector and overall anchor, even if he'll only be getting spot minutes in certain lineups. The 2 keys to their top 5 defense were versatility on the wings, which they still have, and rim protection from every position, which improved. Outside of Reed Sheppard and Aaron Holiday, quite literally every single player in this rotation is a vertical presence. If this is where they end up going with the starting lineup, it's probably the biggest starting 5 in NBA history. And even if they don't, this roster from top to bottom has a level of size, length, and athleticism that basically no other team in the league can compete with. That's their superpower, the way they'll be able to overwhelm any team on the interior on both ends, and how that gives them unlimited options in terms of lineups. However, between the lack of ball handling, pull-up three-point shooting, and overall perimeter playmaking, it's hard for me to see them as anything more than a slightly above average offense, along with a top 5 defense that gives them an extremely high floor, but it's still pretty limiting to the ceiling. Before Fred's injury, I had them as a 55-win team with championship potential. Now I think of them as more of a dark horse contender, who'd have a really tough time going toe-to-toe with OKC or Denver in a potential conference finals matchup. If they're not ready right now though, they're extremely close. It could be as simple as internal development. Reed becomes a starter, Amen becomes an all-star, Şengün makes a push for All-NBA. It could be as simple as a small tweak on the margins, getting a point guard, finding a reliable slasher. Keep in mind, we're still talking about a lineup that features a 21-year-old, 2 22-year-olds, a 23-year-old, and a 24-year-old, all of which have showcased tons of potential. So when it comes to crafting the best possible situation of a team that has both a present and a future, the Rockets are pretty close to as good as it gets.